Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Wele Yu, and I am a product marketing director at dApps, focusing primarily on Flow ecosystem. I'll be giving you a short introduction to Flow. My colleague Casey will share a holistic overview of our progress to date and what lies ahead. Afterwards, our DevX engineer Peter will walk you through on how to get started building on Flow. And finally, our CTO Dit Shirley will be giving a presentation on user-centric protocol design and how that makes Flow uniquely positioned for mainstream adoption. For everyone new to the Flow blockchain, you might be wondering what it is exactly. In short, Flow is a scalable infrastructure for consumer-friendly blockchain applications. And more importantly, Flow can achieve the scalability needed while being environmentally friendly, thanks to its proof-of-stake consensus model. Many of you might also know Flow because of NBA Topshot, the sensational sports collectible application built on Flow. Officially licensed by the NBA, Topshot has been considered one of the fastest growing marketplaces, even compared to traditional internet companies. In less than a year, it has reached over 1 million users and generated over 550 million in marketplace volume. However, the Flow ecosystem is more than just NBA Topshot, as you may imagine. We have a series of amazing applications already launched on top of Flow mainnet, and many are in the process of doing so. And we have already many sectors covered, ranging from gaming to collectibles to music, art marketplace, fashion, and many more. However, the prior image doesn't tell the whole story either. We're seeing an ever-increasing number of projects building on Flow. And more specifically, over 300 projects reach out to us directly, and we have a direct lines of communication with them, with more than 100 of them already made significant progress on their development roadmap. We're super excited to see them join our ecosystem and are happy to provide the support needed for them to succeed. Each project launching on Flow mainnet will also be a value added to the entire ecosystem. We strongly believe that composability will be the multiplier effect that will accelerate innovation at a pace never seen before. One day, building an open application will become the default go-to-market strategy, being able to tap into a global ecosystem from day one. Because of that, Flow will empower developers and innovators to build open worlds and to unlock infinite possibilities. For anyone interested in exploring all those new and exciting possibilities lying ahead, we will wholeheartedly welcome you to Flow. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the presentation.
Hi, everybody. My name is Casey Arrington, and I'm a product manager, a part of the Flow team, primarily responsible for the Flow protocol. Today, I'm going to take some time to talk through what we've been up to this past year at Dapper Labs in building the Flow blockchain, and then briefly touch on some key areas of focus of ours and looking into the future. As I'm sure a lot of you can guess, this past year, we had an extremely busy but productive year in Dapper Labs in bringing the Flow blockchain to life. What started out as our idea of a fundamentally different multi-node architectural design was brought to the public this last year as we were able to successfully launch our Flow mainnet and open up our blockchain to the world. The focus of our multi-node architecture started out as and continues to be focused on being fast, being efficient, and being secure. And we were able to showcase our work around these principles to our community, not only on our initial launch of our mainnet, but via numerous updates to our chain within the last year. At this point in time, Flow currently has 71 different node operators, operating 89 different nodes across our various node types of execution, verification, consensus, collection, and access nodes. This number continues to increase on a consistent basis month over month as operators are able to get up and running with their specified node type in a very expedited manner. We're also able to successfully deploy rewards this past year. So all of our node operators and all their associated delegators are also earning Flow based on their participation to keep the Flow network stable and secure. We've also been able to get to the point with the Flow blockchain where we're running consistent monthly chain upgrades, where we're able to deploy new features to the network while adding new node operators during this process as well. Just a couple of key areas of focus this past year that I wanted to highlight are here. Number one has been platform scalability. As we got more and more applications running on Flow, and these applications increase sometimes very significantly in popularity, we recognized the need to maintain extremely committed to ensuring that Flow is highly scalable and is able to support whatever traffic comes via these applications that are built on top of Flow. We've not only kept scalability as a top priority of ours, but we put even more emphasis on it this past year as we've seen explosive popularity being attracted to our ecosystem applications. Scalability is something that we're addressing in almost every area of our protocol, from node operations to Cadence, which is our programming language, and to network communication. We've been able to make significant progress on this past year and get us to the point that we are right now, where we're very comfortable in supporting all the applications that are currently running on Flow. The next item, which has been a key focus of ours this past year, has been around protocol decentralization. This past year, we took major significant steps towards decentralizing our network, prioritizing features to further the network's resilience to potential Byzantine actors. And then lastly, another key area of focus of ours was around being a permissionless network. So alongside decentralization, we've also focused on really what is needed to create a truly permissionless network, and how can we get there as a blockchain. Next, the ecosystem. So the protocol of our blockchain is a key pillar that has really allowed the flourishing of our ecosystem this past year. At this point in time, we currently have over 100 teams that are building on top of Flow. We have 8 dApps that are currently live on mainnet, and nearly 20 more that are preparing for deployment in the next few months. This past year we've put a lot of emphasis on making building on top of Flow not only one that makes sense, but is also an extremely easy process to do. It's been truly amazing to see the community develop various types of applications and the success that has been able to come from them. Also this past year, we're able to launch what we call as Flowport, which is our provided user interface as kind of like the portal into the Flow blockchain. This portal allows users to stake, to delegate, and then to transfer Flow to other addresses, and then to manage their existing network positions as well. They can use our portal to also see the things like their rewards, and then to take an action on them as well. So for example, being able to restake or redelegate those rewards as well. Flowport was a product that really laid the foundation for an easy to use user interface with allowing anything that anyone could possibly want to do and interacting with the Flow blockchain. And for this upcoming year, we're really looking forward to see how we can evolve this product and bring even more features and enhancements to it. A few other key items from an ecosystem growth perspective that I wanted to quickly touch on was number one, the support for FUSD, which is the first stablecoin to launch on Flow and then to be supported by our ecosystem. The official launch of this is coming very, very soon, so be on the lookout for that. And then number two is a successful integration with our custodial partners of Kraken, CoinList, Finoa, and Blockdo, as they have all onboarded customers to Flow at this time. For our ecosystem to truly flourish and to get to the point that it's at, where we've been able to get as many applications live on mainnet, and then a really lengthy backlog of applications that are soon to be launched on mainnet, we really recognize the need to have developers be knowledgeable and really excited about building on top of Flow. I mean, these developers are what bring the Flow blockchain to the world through their applications, and really are a critical piece of our success as a blockchain. And for this reason, this past year, we created a new pillar, which we aptly named the Developer Experience Portal, with this really the goal to empower third-party developers to launch applications on Flow. The goal was set out. The goal that we set out with, and what we were able to accomplish this past year, is to have an improved developer onboarding experience where we could reduce the time it takes to get an application from basically idea onto testnet and then onto mainnet. And how we did this by putting really heavy focus on creating tools for these developers that they can use, and then ensuring that we have the proper educational material for easy and quick understanding. A couple of things that I want to expand on is the tools that we created were based on direct feedback from community members and the challenges that they ran into in developing and launching applications on Flow. For our educational material, we put heavy emphasis on creating examples and tutorials and other forms of practical educational content that aims to define a really clear and easy path from zero to mainnet. And then lastly, we built the ability for a seamless web integration for dApps to register with our decentralized service, or FCL, which gives them access to all the wallets that are integrated with FCL, which currently include Ledger, Blockdo, and Dapper. All of this work has equated to nearly 2,000 developers that are currently on our testnet at this time. So again, I want to take a few minutes and just look into the future and touch on some of the things that we're currently working on right now and what's kind of what's coming and looking at the road ahead. While we feel extremely good about what we've been able to accomplish so far, we are very understanding that building a blockchain is a constantly evolving product. And just keeping evolution to it and building it up to be more robust is something that we're heavily consistently focused on. So in terms of the protocol, we'll be introducing a formalized epochs process to the network this year that will allow node operators to join and unstake themselves, and then for those joining and unstaking to be processed in an automated fashion by the protocol. And then next, we're going to continue to keep our sights on our three key pillars of scalability. Again, keeping our platform extremely scalable and being able to handle, the most popular application that can be thrown at it, making significant steps towards decentralization, and then making Flow to be a truly permissionless network. In terms of our ecosystem, alongside of our deployment of FUSD, which was a stablecoin, which I just mentioned, we'll also support fiat on-ramps in order for our ecosystem to seamlessly integrate with the stablecoin. A couple of other items that we're going to be heavily focused on this year are going to be on a governance module, and then continuing to build kind of like a robust token model. Lastly, for our developer experience, we're going to continue to really emphasize enabling our community to thrive and build truly world-class applications in an expedited manner. On top of that, we're also supporting many more applications that will be launching on Flow in the upcoming months, and even more so looking forward to the summer and then the end part of this year. So just be sure to be on the lookout for announcements from ourselves on the exciting applications that are going to be coming to you that are built on top of Flow. These are just a couple of high-level items. We are working on much more, which you all will see very soon in the near future. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it, and I'm excited to be here. So thanks.
Welcome, everyone. My name is Mason Nystrom. I'm a senior research analyst at Messari, and I'm happy to have you all here today at Consensus Foundation, this Q&A session with Flow. We're going to have a great discussion and have some awesome questions lined up today. So everyone also please welcome Wile Yu, who's head of marketing at Flow. And Wile, just to kind of set the stage, Flow has really taken off over the past, I would say, 6 months. Obviously, the flagship game NBA Topshot has surpassed over, half a billion in secondary sales. But I'd like to kind of talk about Flow more broadly and discuss kind of where you're heading. So in that regard, Flow is kind of pitched as a scalable consumer application-ready blockchain. To date, Ethereum is in the DeFi category. It has 1 to 2 million users. How do you see Flow getting to 1 million users?
Thank you for having me, Mason, and great to be talking on this stage. Interesting question. So if I remember correctly, we actually surpassed 1 million users on Flow a while back, I think in April. We probably did not make a big announcement, so it was just like an internal milestone. But just to give some reference, NBA Topshot alone has slightly over 1 million registered users, and 500,000 of them actually made the transaction. So that's I guess the stats on the NBA, right? But on the Flow blockchain, we're seeing slightly over 1.5 million users to date, or accounts more specifically. That's also, in addition to NBA Topshot, we're also seeing a lot of momentum on the overall Flow ecosystem, as you mentioned, and I think in the past few months has been great seeing a lot of project launching on Flow and receiving experiencing great momentum. Just to give you an example, right? For example, at the massively multiplayer game Chain Monster that had over 3,500 players just testing in their closed alpha, right? They have not even launched their beta live yet. And Vive NFT marketplace, which they did a $2 million drop for single artists just a few months back. They have over 20,000 users, in just 2 or 3 months from their launch. And they blocked the wallet, which is one main wallet on Flow. They have over 100,000 users. So we're seeing this momentum across the ecosystem, not just the flagship NBA Topshot application, and that's what excites me, personally.
Awesome.
And,
Congrats on 1 million users. And I guess to kind of follow up that question. So you talked about NFT marketplaces, you talked about gaming. Are there any other sectors or consumer type applications that you're most excited to develop on Flow, or that you're most excited to see kind of to be developed by third-party developers?
So regarding that, we're currently seeing many teams across the Flow ecosystem building applications across various sectors, which I'm super grateful for, their interest, also their passion for being on top of Flow. We have the NBA Topshot, which has the sports, I guess, collectible category that's been proven to be pretty successful, and we have many applications of teams following that path, including the UFC that we're building internally, but also MotoGP that recently had a drop on Flow, by the Animoca brands. In addition to that, I can say we have probably across all sectors teams building application, or either launch or on the stage of building application across those sectors. For example, we have a project on the marketplaces side, both custodial and non-custodial, and then we have. We have a white label storefront for dedicated drops. Imagine the celebrities or teams, right? They want to have the Shopify style dedicated storefront. We have music, where we're seeing a lot of interesting innovations being tested right now. And also digital fashion. We have a project called New Uno, which is collaborating with some of the top high-end fashion houses, doing 3D wardrobe potentially. And then streaming side, where some teams are launching collectible moments from streamers' favorite or most popular clips, and then also gaming that I just mentioned, and Chain Monster, but also Dark Country that just finished their first ever land sale drop on Flow that was worth probably more than $500,000 successful drop just a few days ago. So a lot of exciting projects and categories.
Okay, very cool. And you mentioned music, you mentioned a white label kind of platform for Flow's own drops, and obviously NBA Topshot is a licensed partnership with the NBA. And so how does Dapper and Flow more broadly think about their own internal IP versus third-party IP and licensing, and how do you kind of see that progressing?
This is a great question. By the way, we get asked many times, and especially like even even after we support a lot of ecosystem projects, right, with a successful launch, they often like wonder like why we're willing to help them so much, and instead of us capturing like all this value, um, and to be honest, like to be very direct, like Dapper Studio, which is like the I guess segment of the Dapper Labs that focuses on IP collaboration and building out like those experience like NBA Topshot and then on UFC and others. There's a very limited amount of application can build, right? Like all those top IP holders, global brands, they require actually a pretty lengthy collaboration timeline. Like imagine 1 to 2 years, and they require a lot of production and management, right? Imagine like NBA Topshot takes like 50 plus team members. So on that regard, like the overall flow ecosystem is probably going to be 100, if not 1,000 times bigger than anything like and the Dapper Studio can do alone. So that's why we're super interested in helping the ecosystem project succeed and then give like any support possible in terms of like ecosystem support, go-to-market strategy, and also like a global distribution. And also, I guess a fun fact is we are probably the largest source of referrals in terms of like IP brands and collaborators to other projects. So maybe that's something that people were not aware of.
Yeah, very cool. I know you mentioned Animoca Brands, and they have a large war chest of IP as well. So it's interesting to see you guys partnering with them, and I'm excited to see how kind of that plays out over time because they have their hands into stuff like the sandbox as well. So, I'm excited to see how this all cross collaborates over the long run. I'd like to kind of pivot a little. I know that Flow has talked about launching FUSD, which is a stable coin that's going to be on Flow. And so I'd love to know what Flow's kind of plans are to either develop like their own DeFi applications, or what do you think FUSD will facilitate in terms of other developers being able to build on top of Flow?
Mm-hmm. So FUSD is a stablecoin for the entire Flow ecosystem, issued and backed by Prime Trust, a US regulated company. So they are the issuer and also that guarantee the reserve, right? And once that's currently is available in testnet, where every developer can test, play with it, integrate in the application, and then when it's available mainnet, application marketplaces like wallet providers or fiat on-ramp services will be able to leverage the stablecoin to build an even more streamlined onboarding experience for the users. And I think that's the key idea behind FUSD. It's less about a pure DeFi play from our perspective, but more like another toolkit to allow ecosystem team to build like seamless user experience and to lower the mainstream adoption barrier.
Right.
So ideally, we can see like that path going forward.
Very cool. So just as a quick follow-up, you kind of potentially see FUSD being utilized in existing Flow consumer applications and stuff like that.
Yes, correct.
Awesome. And then I kind of just have one last question because I know we're running up on time, but attracting developers is one of, if not like the greatest challenge, but also strength of open source software. And I would love to know kind of Flow's strategy and game plan to attract the best developers to its platform, because that's kind of a very long-term determinant of growth and ecosystem health.
I cannot agree more. There wouldn't be a Flow ecosystem without our amazing developers. I'm proud to say like we have a great product that we're ready to share with the broader developer community around the world. So we are already seeing like a lot of developer activities across, within our community, with over 3,000 developers building or prototyping on testnet before launching on our mainnet. But that compared to the global open source community is just like tiny drop, right? So we have spent probably like the last few months, right, like a big portion of our effort improving our developer onboarding, developer tooling, and also documentation. So our next stage of developer ecosystem growth is going to be focusing on scalable educational content, amplifying our global distribution, and building new developer engagement pipeline. So on on that front, we are ramping up actually our internal hire to be able to tackle that challenge. And we're very excited, to see the results in next few months or like coming year.
Awesome. Sounds exciting. Well, I think that's all the questions we have time for today. Thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Wile. Thank you, Consensus, and look forward to chatting with all you in the future.
Yeah, thank you, Mason. And thank you everyone for attending and joining us today.
Bye, everyone.
Hey there, my name is Peter. I'm a software engineer working on the Flow blockchain, and I'm here today to talk to you about how to get started building on Flow. So I'm on the developer experience team at Flow, and our whole goal is to make it as easy as possible for developers to build and launch applications on the Flow network. And to do that, we work with the broader Flow contributor base to build and maintain a variety of software libraries in different languages, as well as frameworks that are on top of those libraries, learning resources such as written documentation, tutorials, a suite of developer tools, and then we also, on top of all of that, provide direct support to people who are building. So there's a lot to talk about when talking about blockchain development, but for this talk, we're going to get right into the details and talk specifically about how Flow can fit into your existing workflow as a software developer. And when I say software developer, I'm using that term in the broadest sense possible. I'm referring to professionals, but also hobbyists, and really just anybody who's interested in writing code and deploying it to a blockchain. So I want to start with something familiar. This is the client-server application model, and chances are you've probably built an application that is modeled like this in some way. And most applications we use today, especially user-facing applications, use this model as well. So the social networks we use, our streaming websites, our chat applications, the games we love, these days a lot of them compose of a client and a server and then some sort of database. So when I say client, I'm referring to a device that's sort of owned by the user or an application running on a device that has a connection to a server. And typically that server is serving multiple clients at the same time and relying on a database to persist data. So I'm going to show kind of how this model actually can transform and fit into a blockchain context. But before we do that, I want to give a quick definition. So a dApp is a decentralized application. And typically a dApp stores its application state on a distributed ledger rather than a single database. And it will deploy application code that is executed in a shared peer-to-peer environment rather than a single server. And we often talk about dApp development in the context of blockchain development because blockchains provide both a distributed ledger and a shared peer-to-peer environment, or at least most modern blockchains, Flow included. And the developer experience team, we believe that dApp development should feel just like app development at the end of the day. And what we mean by that is it should be accessible. It should feel just like mobile or front end or back end development. It should have tools and it should be approachable and sort of have all of the facets of what modern software development is. And to do that, it should make use of existing software development tools and best practices. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or replace tools that already exist and already do their jobs well. We're more so trying to augment existing tools and processes to sort of work with blockchain technology. So going back to the client-server model, let's see how this can fit with blockchain. So blockchain comes along and it says hi, but before we know where it can fit, we have to talk about what it can actually do. So disclaimer, the 5 points here are a massive simplification. There's a lot that goes into making this possible from a protocol level, but to the application developer, the functionality of a blockchain more or less boils down to these points. So you can write data to a blockchain. Typically that's done with what's called a transaction. You can later read that data. You can deploy code and execute code also inside of a transaction. And then you can authenticate users. Typically that's done with asymmetric public-private key pair cryptography. So you might be thinking, well, we can already do all those things. What's new? But what blockchain does is it makes all of the above possible in a fully shared and fully trustless environment. So here's one place where blockchain might fit. you could imagine having an existing client-server application. Let's say it's an e-commerce website where you're selling shoes, and maybe you want to start accepting blockchain or cryptocurrency as a payment mechanism. So you could incorporate a blockchain network for that purpose. You could connect it to your server, and that would be a totally valid use case. You could also imagine an application where you need to store data in a secure and verifiable way with a lot of transparency. And if that's the case, you might use blockchain as your data layer, because we can store data and we can read it later. But you can also take it a step further. And because you can store data on a blockchain, you can execute code, and you can authenticate users, you can actually, in some cases, replace your existing backend infrastructure with a blockchain. And this is kind of closest to what people often refer to as a dApp, right? So in this case, we've got the client software, and you probably have multiple clients connecting to the same blockchain, because the backend, or what used to be the backend, is now fully decentralized. The app itself becomes decentralized. And that client could be a browser, it could be a mobile phone, a game console, it could be a point-of-sale payment system at your local corner store. It could really be any device that has an internet connection, can be a blockchain client. And because in a decentralized system like this, there is no centralized server that's authenticating users, there has to be something else that sort of attests to the identity of a user and also allows a user to sort of control access to their identity and to their account. And that's where a user wallet comes in. So blockchain wallets are quite common, and in the most basic sense, a blockchain wallet controls access to the private keys that secure a user's blockchain account. So typically when client software is connecting to a blockchain, whenever it needs to perform an action on behalf of a user, it's going through that user's wallet. There are many different kinds of wallets. There are hardware devices like this one. There's also software wallets, and typically the user is free to choose what wallet they want to use. But what's really cool about blockchain is it can support, or a blockchain can support multiple client applications at the same time. So in this example, apps A, B, and C, they're all separate applications built by different developers, and they can all use the same shared database and execution environment, which opens up a lot of possibilities for sort of cross-app communication, interoperability, and in my opinion, the coolest part is composability. So allowing sort of applications to integrate in ways that would otherwise be very difficult to do without a decentralized environment. And just like the other example, typically all of these applications would be using a user's wallet to sort of control access to their account. And from a user's perspective, they can use the same wallet, they can use the same account to log into all of these applications, and they can take their data with them between applications without having to rely on sort of direct API integrations between those applications, and without having to actually give those applications direct ownership over their data, because the data is on the blockchain and it lives inside of their account. And that last piece there, that idea of sort of true user ownership of data, that's something that we are, that's fundamentally a fundamental concept on Flow, and something that we are very excited about developing. And with all that said, now let's talk about where you can start building. So one way to start might be to read all the ins and outs and learn as much as possible about dApp development. But another way is to just fork an example and start building. And that's exactly why we built Kitty Items. So Kitty Items is a fully functional, full stack example dApp that you can use as a learning resource when you're starting your journey on Flow. So what it is it's an NFT storefront and marketplace application, heavily inspired by CryptoKitties, which is very close to our hearts. But it's also a demo of the latest tooling and the best practices for just general Flow dApp development. And lastly, it's a forkable and reusable example. So you can download it, you can clone it, you can refactor it and remix it as much as you want. It's a great place to start. And inside, it's a React web app that authenticates users and sends transactions using the Flow client library and the Blockto wallet. So the Flow client library, or FCL for short, It's a framework that dApp developers can use to manage that connection between the dApp and the user wallet that I was mentioning earlier. And Block2Wallet is right now one of the most popular wallets for general dApp development on Flow. And in addition to that React web app, there's also a REST API implemented with Express.js using TypeScript that parses blockchain events using the Flow JavaScript SDK. So that portion of the example is a great way to kind of learn more about how to use the Flow blockchain from a server environment. And then lastly, the application includes smart contracts written in Cadence, which I'll get into in a minute here. So this is what KittyAtoms looks like. It is a GitHub repository. You can run through the README here, and it shows you how to install the required tools, how to create a testnet account, how to deploy the application, including Heroku if you want that. And then if you scroll down further, there's also a pretty in-depth overview of all the different pieces of the project and how they fit together. So we also wanted to highlight some of the tools that we use on Flow inside of KittyAtoms. So KittyAtoms is compatible with the Flow emulator, which is more or less think of it as like a toy version of Flow that can run on your laptop or instead of your CI pipelines. But it exposes the exact same APIs as the real Flow network, and it uses the same VM and execution environment that the Flow network provides. But it mocks out a lot of the sort of distributed network components and consensus mechanisms to just give you a version of Flow that can be used quickly inside of a local environment without any setup. In addition to that, there's a development wallet that simulates that user wallet component I was talking about earlier, and those two pieces together give you a full local development environment that you can use for quick iteration without having to connect to a live network. But when you are ready to connect to a live network, you can use the Flow testnet and the Block2 testnet wallet to deploy your application to a test environment that more or less simulates real network conditions, but doesn't have, like, you don't need to spend real money. There's no fees, and it's a great place to sort of test out how your application would work in a real decentralized environment. So lastly, we can't talk about app development without talking about Cadence, the smart contract programming language for Flow. A smart contract is essentially a piece of code that you deploy to a blockchain that defines the structure of the data for your application and the ways in which that data can be used. And because smart contracts are deployed to a fully shared execution environment, it's very important they work as expected and that they're bug-free. And as a smart contract developer, you want to be very certain and very confident that the contracts you're writing work as expected. So when we built Cadence, we built it with that in mind. We wanted to build a language that was easy to understand and therefore easy to debug, but also had security features built in that made it easy to build safe and secure blockchain applications. And the best way to learn Cadence is to go to the Flow Playground. So the Flow Playground is a web-based IDE with very low barriers. You can more or less just open the page and start coding and execute Cadence code, deploy contracts, and do it all in a single environment. So this is what it looks like. You get 5 accounts to start. It's very easy to write code, deploy it, and get on your feet. So with all that said, if you're looking to read more and you do want to dig into the documentation, we have a full documentation site at docs.flow.org. It's more or less the portal for all developers who are building on Flow. So you'll find links to all of the different projects I've mentioned, as well as guides and sort of more in-depth tutorials that explain the core concepts. And lastly, come say hi. We hang out on Discord. We have developer channels where developers from around the world discuss the projects they're building on Flow. And we also, the core members of the Flow team, we hang out there and we answer questions on a daily basis. And then every second Friday, we have our bi-weekly office hours. You're welcome to come and hang out, ask questions, and meet other Flow developers. And then if you're looking to have kind of more long-form discussions, the forum is a great place for that. People often go there to engage in sort of discussion around project ideas and looking for feedback from other people. That's a great place to go. So I'll leave this up on the screen in case you need to get any of the links that I mentioned earlier. Typically at this point, I would answer questions, but this is a recording. So instead, come to Discord. You can find me. My username is Pete, and happy to answer any DMs and introduce you to other members of the team. You are always welcome to come hang out and build on Flow. Thank you for the time today, and I hope you have a great day.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Dieter Shirley. I am the CTO of Dapper Labs and the chief architect of the Flow blockchain. And I wanted to take some time today to talk to you a little bit about factors that you can think about for protocol design that have to do with usability for both end users and developers. This might seem like a somewhat strange topic because you sort of think of the core protocol as being a very low-level thing that ideally users don't have to interact with. Surely we'll get to a point where users are dealing exclusively with highly polished wallet software and really great dApps that sort of hide away all the complexity that we typically associate with blockchains. But it turns out that there's sort of certain things that even great UX can't hide, and if you don't design the protocol with usability in mind, you can end up limiting some experiences or making some complexities inherent to the experience. So I want to talk about a few of those that we thought about for Flow and we're integrating into Flow. So the first one from a user standpoint is breaking that link between an account and your keys. So when Satoshi designed Bitcoin, they focused on this idea that all of your coins are locked behind keys, and the mindset in that design was that you might use different keys for sort of different sets of tokens that you might have, and you might have like a whole array of keys. But if someone was sending you tokens, they needed to have some sort of account identifier to know which keys were associated with those tokens so you could unlock them. And of course, that general design is carried over to other blockchains. And on Ethereum, your account identifier, your account address, is derived from your public key. The reason why this is problematic is that keeping your keys long-term is actually quite problematic. I had a situation where I had copied, had a recovery, 3 different pieces of paper as a recovery option for my keys, and you needed 2 of 3 in order to recover the key, and I lost one. And so, proper etiquette in that case, proper procedure in that case is just, cycle your keys. Odds are no one's going to be able to brute force the key with only half of the key information, but you want to make sure that's not likely to happen. But cycling keys on Ethereum is a huge pain in the butt if you have anything more than a couple of tokens. If you have a bunch of CryptoKitties or some other NFTs, the amount of transactions and gas costs it takes to move all your assets from one account to another is massive. And so one of the things that we did in Flow is we made sure that your account has nothing to do with your keys. You can have any number of keys associated with an account. You can change your keys at any time. And we even built multi-sig into the account model so that if you want to have multiple keys with different weights and require, sort of a 3 of 5 system for transactions to be signed, that's all built into the account model. The other thing that that is hard to sort of abstract on top of a blockchain if it's not built in is the notion of a multi-action transaction. So most blockchains, when you submit a transaction and you can have it do some action. You can have it transfer some tokens. You can have it interact with the DEX. You can have it maybe go buy an NFT. But what if you want to do multiple things? What if you want to take some tokens in your account and exchange them for a different kind of token on a DEX, and then use the resulting tokens to go buy an NFT because the NFT is being sold in a token that you don't normally hold in your account? Well, on Ethereum, of course, you're certainly welcome to go to the DEX and do the exchange and then take the results of that and go to the NFT marketplace and buy the NFT there. But what if the NFT is gone by the time that the token conversion happens? Well, now you have to convert your tokens back to the original asset that you held, and you might, be losing some exchange rate going both ways. If we could have a transaction that could do multiple actions within a single transaction, you could have a single transaction that goes to the DEX, does the exchange, takes the result of that exchange, and goes to buy the NFT. And if the purchase of the NFT fails, the transaction fails. And if the transaction fails, then everything about the transaction gets reverted, including the purchase of those tokens. And so it's as though nothing happened. And so making sure that, so one of the things we built into Flow is that we made sure that a transaction can be arbitrarily complex. It can have any sort of number of steps in it, so that if you have a multi-step process that you want to do and you want to do it atomically, you can do that in a single transaction with having to deploy any code to the blockchain. Of course, this raises another issue, which is, as a user, how do I even know what a transaction is doing? I go to a dApp website, it proposes a transaction for me. If that transaction is very simple, then of course the wallet software can assure me that it understands what's happening in that transaction. When we open the door for these complex multi-step transactions, suddenly it becomes very difficult for the wallet software to sort of analyze that transaction and say, well, what's really happening here? And so in Flow, we actually designed the transaction to be in multiple parts. So we have what's called the prepare statement, then we have the main execution block, and then we have a post condition as well. And what happens is that it is only during the prepare statement that the transaction has access to the assets in your account. And that prepare statement can be very small. So using my example from before, maybe that's where it takes 50 tokens out of my my main account that it's going to eventually go and send to the DEX and then use the proceeds to buy an NFT. And so during that prepare statement, we do something very simple, which is take 50 tokens out of my account. All of the rest of the actions happen in that execute statement, going and talking to the DEX, making sure that the exchange rate is within bounds of what I expected, using the proceeds after the exchange to go and buy the NFT, taking any change from either of those, any leftover funds from either of those exchanges and depositing it back into my account, and of course taking the resulting NFT and putting it in my account as well. All of that can happen in the execute statement. And so the wallet only has to look at that prepare statement, and it can know with absolute certainty that this transaction, even though I've signed the whole transaction, that the contents of my account can only be accessed in that prepare statement. And so that transaction, no matter how complicated the execute statement is, can only touch 50 of that one kind of token that the prepare statement pulled out. So that's very powerful. And on the backside, we have this post condition. And what that means is that you can put any sort of assertion in there. In this case, it would be, say, the presence of the NFT I wanted to buy in my account. And so it could have as a post condition, look, if this NFT should be in my account. And the way the blockchain works is it runs that prepare statement, taking the assets out of my account. Once those assets, the prepare statement is over, my account is locked down, and that transaction has no special access to my account at that point in time. The execute statement runs. It can be arbitrarily complex, but it's not running with any special privileges. It only has access to the assets that I gave it access to in the prepare statement. And then when the post condition runs, it makes sure that the result I was expecting has happened. And if it doesn't, again, it reverts the whole transaction and everything goes back to the way it was before the transaction even started, which means as though those 50 tokens didn't even come out of my account in the first place. And so the wallet can ignore the execute section entirely and just look at that prepare and post condition. And it can tell me with great confidence that this transaction I'm signing, at most, it's going to take 50 tokens out of my account. And it's guaranteed to result in me having that NFT in my account, or nothing having happened except for me paying the gas cost of running the transaction. The other thing that we added to Flow, and this was of great importance after what we saw happening with CryptoKitties when we launched, the blockchain was completely overwhelmed, and people were running into all sorts of problems where their transactions would take a long time to resolve. And so Flow transactions can expire. And what that means is that the wallet software can set any any sort of expiry time it wants, 10 minutes or less. And it can say, look, this transaction, either it will be included in the blockchain in the next, let's say 2 minutes, or this transaction is invalid and it can't ever be included in any blockchain ever. Now, it might seem like that's a bad thing. Like, well, maybe I want it to wait 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Maybe I want this thing to happen half an hour from now. But that's okay, because my wallet software can actually just, every time it expires after 2 minutes, it can issue a new one. Because a transaction that isn't processed, of course, doesn't cost anything. And so when that transaction expires, it can just issue a new one silently in the background. And the whole time, it can have a giant cancel button for me in the UI. And if I click that cancel button, of course, it knows not to reissue that transaction on my behalf. And so I can know with great certainty as an end user, either that transaction resolves within 2 minutes, or it will never resolve. And I don't have to do any, replace by fee or anything like that if the transaction doesn't resolve in that first minute or two, because I know that it's expired and it's now would be considered invalid by the blockchain. The other neat thing we did in Flow is that we actually put your stuff in your account. That seems like a crazy statement. Of course, blockchains, where else would your stuff live? But it turns out that most blockchains, and predominantly Ethereum, both the ERC20 and ERC721 specification, work on a ledger model, which means that there is a central ledger, ironically on a decentralized system, there's a single central ledger managed by the smart contract, and it keeps track of which assets each user owns. So if I own CryptoKitty number 852, then there is an entry in the ledger, CryptoKitty 852, and next to it is my Ethereum account. Now, this might seem like it's not that big of a deal, but it turns out that with this model, it's actually kind of complicated to figure out what you own. You have to go to every single ERC721 contract and ask it, well, does this account own something in the account in this smart contract? And then you go to the next one. Does this account own anything in this smart contract? Same for all of the ERC20s. And of course, as time goes on, we're not going to have less of these things. It's just going to be more and more and more. And so the complexity of finding out what you own is going to just keep getting greater and greater. And of course, most of those queries are going to come up nothing because you don't own most of those things. The way we manage it in Flow is actually all of your assets live inside your account. And so if you want to know what things you have in your account, they're all right there. Even more importantly, all of the approvals that you've given to let people access items in your account on your behalf. For example, maybe you've created an arrangement with an online exchange to sell NFTs on your behalf. And you're willing to trust that smart contract to withdraw NFTs and sell them to people on your behalf, provided that it confirms that you accept that price. Well, those approvals, again, on Ethereum, all of those approvals are stored in the smart contracts where you put them in. So if you forget that you've put in an approval, that approval might sit there latent for a very long time. On Flow, all of those approvals are actually represented in your account, and they can be fully enumerated so that you know exactly what's in your account and sort of who has access to it. The other thing that we spent a lot of time thinking about on Flow was how to make life easier for developers. And one of the first things we did, in fact, we made this available publicly before the blockchain was even completely running, was something we call the emulator. When you're developing software, needless to say, you don't get it right on the first go, and there's a lot of testing and iteration that goes on in order to make sure you get that smart contract right. So one of the things we wanted to do was make sure that that was super easy, and so we created this standalone binary we call the emulator, and it lets you deploy smart contracts, run transactions. It provides the same, sort of gRPC API that the primary blockchain does. So you can even test your off-chain interactions with the blockchain, all running this emulator that runs in a very small memory footprint and launches super quick. And so that makes testing, debugging so much easier. And of course, one of the interesting side effects of this is that because we built this standalone emulator, we were able to take that code, we were able to embed a version of that onto our website. So if you go to onflow.org/play, you can find a playground, and you can go there and you can see samples of fungible token, non-fungible token smart contracts, and you can run them right inside the browser, make changes to them, see what the results are, have multiple simulated accounts, and see what happens as you move assets between those accounts. And I think it makes the whole system more approachable. The other thing, and speaking of the Flow Playground, the other big thing we did was we made sure, we created our own smart contract programming language. So this might seem like a kind of a crazy idea. And I think if you've never written code for Solidity before, you might be very surprised that we would do this. But I'll tell you what, most people who have worked with Solidity, when I tell them that we decided to write our own smart contract language, their reaction is less confusion and more, oh, thank God. So the reason we did this was because we felt that there had to be an easier way. I think, we're probably the only blockchain development team who started by building applications on top of blockchains rather than started by building blockchains. And so I think we have a lot more empathy for the plight of the poor dApp developer. And so we built a language that is designed from ground up to make sure that it makes sense in the context of blockchains. And in the context of blockchains, there are two really critical aspects that you need to deal with. One is this notion of valuable assets, moving tokens around, moving NFTs around. And the other one is just this idea of access, right? No one should be able to move my tokens but me. And so we baked into the language primitives for handling ownership and access controls. That's built right into the language. And the result is something that is, I think just a dramatic improvement. And I can give you a really concrete example of how that's manifested. So for example, the Open Zeppelin reference implementation of ERC20, beautiful code, very neatly written, well documented. It's about 300 lines of code, but it's, like I said, it's very well documented. So there's probably maybe 150 lines, 150 lines of sort of actual code in that thing. But it's sort of, the most basic, simplistic, correct implementation of ERC20. Most people use that as a basis when they're building a new ERC20 smart contract. By contrast, if you go look at what is happening in Rust, I found a simple ERC20 equivalent fungible token implementation for the Cosmos network written in Rust, and that was almost 400 lines of code. And that was 400 lines, and I didn't see a single comment in the whole thing, and I found it actually pretty intimidating and densely and complex. And so, it doesn't seem like going to Rust and WASM is a real improvement here. In Cadence, our reference fungible token implementation is just over 100 lines of code. If you take out the comments, it's less than 100 lines of code. It's about 70 lines of code. So that's about half of what Solidity is. So broadly speaking, Rust, twice as many lines of code to do the same thing. Cadence, half as many lines of code to do the same thing as Solidity. And so we think that that's a huge improvement. Unsurprisingly, if you know us, you'll know that that we looked at NFTs as well, and NFTs are even easier. If you look at the ERC 721 reference implementation from Open Zeppelin, again, very beautiful, well written. It's even longer than the ERC 20 specification. It's a little bit more complex in Solidity to deal with non-fungible tokens than it is to deal with fungible tokens. In Cadence, it's actually the exact opposite. The non-fungible token specification is simpler than the fungible token specification because, again, we've built into the language this idea that there are certain data structures that represent assets of value, and that's managed directly by the language. So hopefully you can see from this that by coming with some empathy for our users, both our developers and our end users, that we were able to bake things into the protocol that's going to make their lives so much easier over the coming years and decades that we hope that Flow will be used.